Hey, what's up, guys? Little man with a big opinion here. Today's news story kind of covers a recurring topic, and that is World War III. In the past, we have discussed that regional conflicts all happening at the same time could end up involving more countries, and if you follow that kind of thinking with World War II, then we could already be in our World War III and not know it. Um, if you don't know the history, Japan invaded China several years before what we generally think of as the start of World War II, being September 1st, 1939, Germany invading Poland. But even in Europe, Germany had already occupied land in Czechoslovakia, Austria. um, Italy had already moved into Ethiopia, and Russia was eyeing up other Balkan countries, and then you had Finland and their winter war. So if you think about it, you know, Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Palestine, China and Taiwan. Um, you can always find an article about India and Pakistan doing something. What's going on in Venezuela right now? Venezuela, for the most part, kind of reminds me of Spain during this whole time, them having their civil war. So each of these individual things could turn into a bigger factor. And the article that I read that has me making this video comes from the Washington Post, and it should be of a concern to the U.S. because we've said we will support Taiwan. Um, we're moving military assets towards Israel right now with their heightened tensions with Iran. But in this article, it talks about how Taiwan is basically not prepared at all, and China is getting closer and closer to being prepared to, for their reunification war. It breaks down the specifics, and if you look at it from a country point of view, there might be some of us that are putting in more effort and training and funds because oh, one of the things that they mention is their active military is 155,000. Their reserved forces is nearly 2 million. And the way their reserve forces work is if you were born after 2005, you have to be in the military for a year. Once you get out every other year or every 2 years, uh, you're still considered a reservist, and you're supposed to do like a 6 week training. Um, what the article describes is not enough money, not enough instructors, and they still have options to not, you know, join the military. Like if you're going to college, or you're the only child, or there's like 7 or 8 things on their list. They were saying the vast majority of people born in 2005 wouldn't be trained until 2027 because that many of them had submitted some sort of waiver to miss out on this round of training. So there's a huge gap in their military training. Most of their civilians that don't want to do it are, very adamant that, they're not going to join the military. They're going to do something else. Um, those that do want to join are finding that there's a lack of instructors, finding that there's a lack of finances going into it. Some of them described the training as veterans were teaching them, kind of hip pocket training, and they were honest with them and said, we don't really know what the commander's intent with this is. Um, so even those that are going to this training feel like they're wasting their time. Um, the article mentioned a little bit about, if Trump gets into office, he's going to want, more effort going into it on their part. And that worries him as well. There is some discussion between South Korea, Japan, Australia, Taiwan, the people much closer to the conflict and how they're going to respond to it. Because a good point was brought up that the U.S. will be able to, have a very quick initial response with a small, detachment, but it could take weeks for the United States to, really get involved. Something else that they mentioned in the article, and it's kind of making them rethink their strategy, is there's a 110-mile gap between Taiwan and mainland China. And for years, they discussed their plan being stopping China before they can even make landfall. And now they're kind of switching to the idea of they might have to go on a defense of the island itself, because if you hadn't watched the video before, China's not doing a great job of building like a massive well, no, they're doing a great job of building a massive navy. It's not, a super high-tech fancy navy, but that article from a few weeks ago discussed that at least in the South China Sea, the U.S. and China would now be able to equally exchange blows. And it was mostly from a quantity over quality perspective. I did a little bit more digging. If the U.S. were to send more of their fleet stuff that's involved in the Atlantic and other parts of the world, then it's a different story. But Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, all of those countries would basically have to work together to make this whole system work from a defensive standpoint. China's got a 2 million man army. They're conscripting about 400,000 people a year. And from the research that I've done, most of their lower enlisted don't stay enlisted for very long. They're doing a pretty good job of keeping a young army put together, which I couldn't find exact numbers, but if they're conscripting 400,000 a year, that means they're going to have a very substantial reservist force that, if we're grading them 1 out of 10, they're not going to be a 10 in their, training and ability, but, they're going to be higher than like a 3 or a 4 just because they've gone through whatever their training is. Again, playing a numbers game, we don't really know how the next conflict is going to work out. We're seeing a lot more drone usage. There is a step back from, a conventional standard warfare style. But, the technology side of things, it'll be really interesting, to see how certain systems can be shut down, how our systems will be affected, and taking all of that into consideration, we still need to continue to prep. There was a chemical fire in West Virginia, I think, somewhere in the Northeast. Um, they haven't, released whether it was an accident, a system failure, or whatever, but there's a very real possibility that a system was hacked into. There was another story about a water plant system getting hacked, and the only thing that they changed was instead of the water flowing this way, they made the water flow this way. So the clean water was going back into the poop system, and homes were getting flooded with crap water. And doing that makes almost all of the water system, you can't drink any of it. You've got to go to bottled. You're past the point of even doing a boil notice. I think the U.S. is working on it. Our military is definitely leading that front. But something as simple as we're going to increase the safe temperature range on this system by 4 degrees, so maybe you don't notice it, and the temperature operates 4 degrees higher for an extra 24 hours, and then it's got to do a system shutdown for 3 days while they replace and fix things, where typically they have a planned routine schedule where it's down for 4 to 6 hours, and another system is going to work at a heightened capacity, just to supplement, and they get that one fixed and they can lower both of them back down. It's things like that that are also going to affect us in whatever the next conflict is. Don't think because we have thousands of miles of ocean in between us that the U.S. will not be affected, the way it wasn't so much during World War II and even World War One. There's a lot of variables that most people, can't comprehend and don't expect to happen in whatever the next conflict is going to be. And with our elections coming up, there's a very real possibility that things can get tense around the world very quickly, as the U.S. is definitely still in the top place militarily, and very close to the top economically. And when we're in our transition stages is when bad things can happen. So stay vigilant, keep paying attention to the news, subscribe to this channel because I do my best to bring you a video every day. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you have a friend or family member that would benefit from these videos, share the channel with them. With that, see you in the next one.